Is. Hmm? Oh no, here's Councillor Hurst. Good evening. I'll read out these things. The meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. Any exempt private items on the agenda, the live stream will cease prior to the meeting moving into private. There might be a short delay. A recording of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Would members and officers please remember to switch microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone, which is a bit difficult for me being small, and switch microphones off when finished. Reporting officers joining using Teams, use the hands up icon on your screen for questions and comments. Please turn your camera and microphone on when speaking and off when finished. Please switch mobile phones off or place on silent mode. Thank you. Well, that looks a bit more respectable than what it was 3 minutes ago.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong tonight, but New Bedford Road.
Yeah, there was 4 of us, and it had gone 6.
Yeah.
Right, we'll start the actual meeting now. Apologies.
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor Franks, Chair.
And Councillor Chapman.
And Councillor Chapman. Thank you.
He's a member of the committee, isn't he? Kashif. He was somewhere else and he was supposed to come tonight.
Oh, okay.
He's substituting somebody.
Okay, we'll accept his apologies.
Thanks. Now to the minutes. Is the public part of the meeting on the 9th of August? Is it okay for me to sign?
Previous minutes, Chair.
Yes, certainly.
The one item refers to the fact that some milestones or timescales to keep track of the objectives, and that they were going to be included in future. I just wanted to know whether officers have actioned that now.
Sorry, can you take that again? I'm not quite clear what the query is.
Yeah. A member suggested the inclusion of an additional column in the appendix relating to milestones or timescales to keep track of the objectives. The officer agreed to include that point in the report to the executive. Do we know if that's been actioned and whether we will see that in our agenda items tonight?
Do you just want to refer to what page you're reading from, Councillor?
I don't know what the page number is. I don't know what the page number is. I'm working from the printed papers that were given me, not from those online,
No.
and the page numbers have changed.
So if you...
Sorry, anybody who's using the laptop, is anybody using the laptop? Can you bear with us, Steve? Because it's going to be easier if we work from the minutes, that the original agenda that we got, that we've all got printed off. Are you happy with that, Steve?
That's fine by me, yes.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
David, you can now
Yeah,
give us...
in which case then, Chair, thank you. It's on page 9 of 562 in mine, second paragraph.
Chair, what I can say about that is that we can follow that up and feedback, if that's okay.
I'd be grateful if you do. There are other items also in the minutes which refer to actions which will be done in the future, but we're not told at the meeting or since when those actions are going to take place. So I'd appreciate it if you could go through the minutes and where they are future actions, that we get a date by which those actions will be included, please.
That's not a councillor. I mean, usually we do, but unfortunately, sometimes they fall through. I will try and follow this one up. Thank you.
Be helpful if I was to send you a quick email just highlighting those bits that I think need that action. Would that help?
If you could do that, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I will do. Otherwise, Chair, I'm quite happy with the minutes. It was just making sure those action points were followed up.
I can sign public, and there was also something in private on that.
Yeah, that's the private one. It's not part of that.
Oh, no, it's
right at the end. It's the last item.
So we leave that until the end. Right,
Yes.
Sorry for that. I'm getting a bit confused. Yes, it is quite easy. Chair's update. Update on the emerging Stockwood Park Master Plan report. I asked for this. Roger requested that it should be moved on the exec forward plan by 2 months. This is as a result of the need to review projected operating costs in terms of forecast fuel, energy, material and services inflation. We will keep an eye on this item through the work programme, and fingers crossed we will have it in 2 months' time. There was 2 items withdrawn from the agenda today: the draft local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and also the electric vehicle charge point strategy. They're both due to be resubmitted on the 24th of October.
Chair,
Yeah.
That's correct.
Now, this is where I need help. The protection of Luton parks and green spaces. It went to exec last night. Do you know what the... Tom, can you help me out on this one? Were you at the exec last night? All right. Oh, yeah, Tuesday, yes. It was adopted. Thank you. That's all I've got to report. Any disclosures of interest?
None, Chair, to my knowledge at this point.
Urgent business?
No urgent business, Chair.
References from committees and other bodies?
There are no references to this one.
Right, we will now start. Item 7. Performance.
Thank you. Just bear with me a moment.
LBC Corporate Performance Report 2022 to 23, Q1.
Which you're sharing on the screen.
Right. Which one is Aurora leading on it?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Over to you.
Yes, so this is the LBC Corporate Performance Q1 report. Just a brief summary. You can see from this pie chart here that overall performance is good, with 21 measures showing as green, 6 are amber and 6 are red. This represents quite a significant leap in good performance since the previous quarter, with many services which have been heavily impacted by COVID-19 now operating above or within target levels. The results from this quarter show that the measures services have taken to adapt to the challenges and new ways of working have had quite a tangible positive impact on both performance and service users. Starting with the reds, town centre footfall in Q1 stands at 2.03 million, which is below the quarterly target of 3.5 million. Footfall in Luton has been falling since 2016. 48.2% of education, health and care plans were issued within 20 weeks, excluding exceptions, which is lower than the target of 90%. Although services have not reached the target, compliance is well below 90% on a national level. Services here are due a SEND inspection and plans are being put in place to improve performance in this area. The percentage of influenceable council spend through procurement with local suppliers figure is 41.4%, which is short of the quarterly target of 50%. The number of homelessness open cases in Q1 stands at 667, which exceeds the annual target of 450. Remaining below the target indicates positive performance, as it means that fewer people are being registered as homeless. The percentage of children attending good and outstanding secondary schools are 78%, which is below the 82.1% target. However, it should be noted that this figure is an improvement from the previous year, which was 72.4%. The number of affordable new homes completed, 12, has fallen short of the quarterly target, which is 25. Onto the positive performance. Airport passenger numbers for Q1 are above target. This is because of effective management of staff through the furlough period and early action to recruit new employees. These actions have meant that Luton Airport has managed to avoid a lot of the disruption that has been experienced by other major airports across the country. And recovery of passenger numbers post-COVID-19 is forecast to reach pre-pandemic levels by around 2024. The number of newly approved foster carers Q1 figure is 6, which is on track to meet the annual target of 25. And the good performance in this area is down largely to the recruitment and marketing drive, which has taken place in the between April to June period. Statutory compliance completed within timescale remains high for both housing and corporate, with the figures either maintaining or improving. The total business rates due and total business rates collected, Q1 figure of 24.8%, is on track to reach the annual target of 99%. The amount of council tax collected is 29.9%, which is on track to meet the annual target of 96.5%. The percentage of children attending good and outstanding primary schools is 93.5%, which is above target, which was 89.7%. And the percentage of children attending good and outstanding special schools is 100%. The percentage of ASCOF adults in contact with secondary mental health services who are in employment have reached the quarterly target of 10%. The rate of homeless applications to acceptances is 12%, which is below the target and England average of 20% of total decisions. Remaining below the target indicates positive performance, as it means that fewer people are being registered as homeless. The number of homeless households allocated a permanent offer through the housing register is 46, which is above the quarterly target of 45. The number of cases prevented from becoming homeless figure is 138, which is on track to meet the annual target of 370. The proportion of registered care services rated good or outstanding is 75%. Although services have not been able to meet the target of 100%, the team have been proactive in initiating new systems and procedures to maintain the quality of the market and continually risk assessing ratings and monitoring sustainability. And finally, the number and percentage of senior employees of an ethnic minority background aiming to reflect our communities. Q1 figure of 22% is on track to reach the target of a 2% year-on-year increase. Thank you. Any questions?
Councillor Hussain.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, the congratulations to special schools who have achieved good, outstanding 100%. So we need to thank them because it's not an easy in terms of providing those services. And I think we ought to be saying thank you very much for their hard work, despite the COVID, and they still stayed open right throughout the period. And that really is something that we, their dedication ought to be really appreciated, and thank you to them from this committee. I hope that everybody supports that. Just a couple of questions, really. Homelessness, and in terms of the young families, right, which is on the increase, and I'm sure Councillor Shah is sitting there, can give some explanation. And also the target of affordable housing, but 25 short. Is that possibility towards the end of the year that we may be able to read that? And the last one is the gas safety, 26%. That's pretty low to start when we're looking for 100%. Does that risk anyone or in any shape or form? Yeah. So what is this figure I'm trying to work out what we're looking for?
So the reason you got 12 and a quarter is we no longer count, we don't count new properties what are used as temporary accommodation, even ones we bought and everything else as permanent homes. So the permanent homes you've got, but for your gas, your electric safety was 100%, and your gas safety was 98, I think, Colin, weren't it? But for our own stock, the private sector is a different kettle of fish. But social housing is 198.
Is that private sector housing?
But what we'll do is get some commentary from them so that for the next quarter report, they dive deeper into that and explain what it is. But it's very likely it's just to do with how they monitor it, and it's slightly different to housing.
Housing's got to be there.
Yeah, they're probably adding it up, saying this, we're probably above target actually, and we probably just need to reflect it better in the targets. So I'll pick that up and we'll go away and go away and come back on that one. But the rest of them are for housing, so I'll ask Colin to.
So, Councillor, can you just repeat the homeless question, please?
Yeah, homeless question in terms of the increase in that, and what are we doing in terms of trying to, in prevention terms, and now in light of the cost of living increase, it would be more likely that we will be getting a larger increase because people will not be able to afford to pay the rent. It's either feeding the kids or paying the rent. So the choices are very difficult. So, in terms of those things that we need to be really mindful, and what in terms of the prevention that we can do at least through here, because last thing, Chair, with your permission, we need to do is evicting a family with the children. One side of the council is doing that. The other side of the council have a statutory duty to provide those children with a home. So we need to get a coordinated approach between the two services to be able to see that, we don't do the eviction and then next day they're coming down here and looking for an accommodation. So I'm saying is that corporately, are we doing something that shouldn't be happening, and that we should do utmost of every effort that these families with the children do not become homeless if we can.
Thanks, Councillor. So from council tenancies, we haven't evicted someone for a long time, but there are some households in temporary accommodation who break their licence agreements and who we may have to evict for all sorts of reasons. And there's a process that we follow when we're dealing with that. Just to talk about homelessness generally, just to bring you up to date, end of August, we had 443 homeless households approach us. In July, we had 450 homeless households approach us, and they're not just single people, they're families as well. So we're getting last year we had over 4,000 households approach us. This year, if the trajectory stays the same, we're going to have over 5,000 homeless households approaching us. Now, our prevention targets this year are on target. We're on target to prevent over 300 odd homeless households. That's before they go into temporary accommodation. But we still have a lot of people in temporary accommodation. 1,079 were the last figures, and we're reducing that. But there's been a slight blip over the last 3 months. This slightly gone up, but we'll manage that. It's the footfall, councillor. We're getting lots and lots of homeless households. Majority of those are being evicted from the private sector or parental exclusions. They represent probably over about 50% of homeless approaches. We can't do anything about homeless approaches. What we are trying to do, obviously, on this agenda today, we've got a couple of licensing papers on the agenda. We have to manage the private sector better. We have to manage the standards better. We have to speak to the landlords and make sure their standards are better, because they're evicting people, and sometimes they're evicting people inappropriately and against the law. So we can't stop homeless households approaching us. This borough is a magnet for homelessness. It's just a reality. Over the last number of years, it's been the same, and that's why temporary accommodation is so high. We're trying to do something about that. But, you know, there are going to be some people who came to us yesterday. Someone came to us who was out of the country for 14 years. We couldn't help them because they had no recourse to public funds. And we had to get the police to get them out of reception because they wouldn't leave. We gave them the advice that we could, but we can't actually help someone if they've got no recourse because they can't pay their rent, etc., etc., etc. Very, very difficult situation, councillor. We're faced with that every day.
If I may, I think I understand the situation that you're talking about, and I see in terms of legality, what I understood it to be, and I'm sure it is, there was a protocol between housing and the children's services, which were that they work so closely with each other, so that not one, you know, I mean, I'm sure Councillor Joe and other colleagues are familiar with at least one or two occasions where I saw officers arguing with each other to say, well, it's not housing, it's children's services. Children's services, and now it's housing. I don't give a damn one way or the other, personally, right? You know, whoever it is one council, and it ought to be one thing, and whichever budget it comes, it is the council. So we need to get that sorted rather than having that family with the small children at the reception here arguing whose budget it is the money coming from, right?
Sure.
So I'm asking for is that have we got that protocol? Is it working? Is it not? And if it's not, then what are we doing about it?
It is working. It's in place. It works very, very well. And obviously, some occasions we may have some disputes because, you know, legislation may be clear, but there is all sorts of different opinions about interpretation of the law. Sometimes we have those conversations, and I would like to think that we're not standing up in the office fighting each other, which we don't do. But we have got working protocol, and it's very effective, and we're working very closely with children's services on these issues.
Thanks. Do you really want to come in, Tom?
Just one quick one, yeah. Remove stay driver. What happens now is eviction taking place from the private sector or from some of our temporary accommodation because of different features of the rules and everything. If there's children involved, before the eviction takes place, children's services are automatically involved in that decision of where they're going and everything. That's a new protocol in place and working.
Thanks, Tom, for that clarification. Councillor Shabira Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. Completely echo my colleagues' congratulations for special needs children's. On page 70, where are we on? Right, sorry. 77 of the presentation, the first slide, the number of cases prevented from becoming homeless, Q1 figure. What do you exactly mean? I mean, were they provided with emergency accommodation, sheltered accommodation, a permanent offer? What do you exactly mean? Thank you.
So when someone comes to us and says they're homeless, there's a certain amount of time before they're actually homeless, roofless. And that period of time is around 56 days. We work with them to try to either stop them from leaving that property or find some alternative home, usually in the private sector. And that's what we generally mean by homeless. Sometimes it can just be some advice that prevents them from leaving the current home that they're in. And some people don't have that type of background, they won't understand it. So sometimes it's a simple case of giving them the proper advice, probably speaking to the landlord, probably speaking to the parents to prevent them from, you know, by the way, if you evict your child, they're going to be homeless on the streets. You know, that could be a level of advice. And the way we count that is if we prevent someone from being homeless for 6 months, that's called a prevention. But usually it's more longer term in the private sector.
The follow one, thank you. On the same page, you said, obviously, acknowledging the fact that the service isn't able to meet the target of 100%, fair enough. The team has been proactive in initiating new systems and procedures. Can you just give an example? It'd be good to know what kind of systems and procedures you've put in place.
So we're reviewing things all of the time because it's challenging. And we've just recently started to look at how particular officers operate in the front line. So initially, there's an initial approach and they're received by a number of officers. They sift them, if you like, and then they move them on to the second stage, which is where there's more in-depth advice given and more prevention work happening. And then if that fails, they go into the back office, if you like, where the decision is made around whether or not someone's actually homeless, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just procedural stuff, smoothing out the pathway. That process can probably take 100 odd days. And we're sort of trying to cut that down as best we possibly can. So these are procedural internal things.
Bit about the continuing, well, on the same, I suppose, point, continually risk assessing ratings. So is that ratings in terms of what?
Risk assessing households.
Okay.
Because most households come to us and we don't know much about. Is that the same one there? I'm just making sure that we're on the same one.
It's still on the same presentation slide, page 77. So basically it says, well, if I just read the bullet point, it says, although the service has not been able to meet the target of 100%, the team has been proactive in initiating new systems and procedures to maintain the quality of the market and continually risk assessing ratings and monitoring sustainability.
Yeah, that's actually care homes. Sorry, we've moved on from housing.
Okay.
We hadn't realised. So that's the that's about the quality assurance of care homes. And I think that they've had quite an influx of demand. So I think that's a big part of it. But is that something you'd like us to ask the service to expand on? And maybe
yeah, that would be really useful to know.
To understand why.
Yeah, because I actually thought it was related to the homelessness.
No, this is actually about, we have a quality team who inspect care homes, and it's about that. I know we're a very proactive team, but I think they have had some challenges, and they also had some IT challenges because they were part of the problems we've advanced as well. So we'll ask them to expand in the next report.
If you can, that would be useful. I mean, not obviously don't go overboard, but
but we'll get them to explain it a bit more.
Clarity would be great. Okay,
thank you. Just like the standards in, a home. There's a certain amount of standards that we expect the care home to live by, and that's the standards that we're referring to. There's a proper quality assessment of all care homes, and if they fall below a certain level, we won't use them. So that's what that's referring to.
Okay, yeah, just a tiny bit of expansion, I suppose, for next time would be great.
It's probably worth saying, I think we won't use them, but I think sometimes some care homes are a little bit in flux.
Okay.
So we might be using care homes who are not quite at the standard.
Okay.
So it's not that we're using care homes who are below standard. I think generally they're working with them to get them up to standard. And then they'll make a decision, shall we keep using them or not? So I think it's not that they're below standard, it's probably that they need to improve their paperwork, they need to improve, it's not necessarily a problem with quality, but we'll get them to explain that a bit more in the next one.
That'd be really useful.
Great,
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions, David?
First of all, a comment. I agree with Councillor Hussain. I think that given the constraints that the team has been faced with, I think the overall results have been pretty damn good, frankly. So I would share that view. A few detailed questions. I had one which was the same as the councillor before on new systems. You've answered that to a certain degree, but I don't feel I have enough information, even with your answer, as to what those new systems actually are. I think that in respect of systems to help people do their job within the council, we're not doing awfully well, frankly, in comparison with some commercial enterprises.
So council, just for example, then let me just give you another example. We brought in some new IT system because the current system the system we had at the time was quite clunky. So we brought in another piece of software that went live July last year. That helps officers just to manage their caseloads better, get more information, be able to navigate the system. So they're the sort of system issues that we refer to. And you may not see the results from the system, but it gives us a better opportunity to manage cases much better, much more flexibly, and gives us the ability to retrieve information and report that information more readily than we used to be able to do.
Just a straightforward question on that, if I may. My experience from having implemented customer relations management, which is similar in a way, in 3 different commercial companies, unless everybody in the units use it, it becomes very quickly useless. Does everybody use these new systems?
Yes, the homeless officers use it, council. Not the whole of the housing service uses it. It's refined to the homeless officers, and all of the homeless officers use it. So from that point of view, it's very, very joined up. We are going to be bringing in a new housing system right across housing from next year, hopefully July. That will, all of housing will operate, including people doing rent arrears, people managing estates, the homeless team as well. So from that point of view, we're going to be a joined up housing service IT wise.
All right, Chair, I'll try and keep these to the minimum. Yes. The section dealing with timeliness of benefits, I got the impression, that's for me at least, on page 41. It looks as if we haven't been doing as well as we might do on timeliness of benefit payments. Am I getting the right impression there? And if I am, what plans have we got to make it better?
I'm just having a look at that one. And I think from what the service have said, and I thought this would be the case, is that they've had very high demand over the last quarter, and that's really affected them. When people are having a lot of change of jobs and change of circumstances, they can get an influx of benefit changes, and then that leads to a backlog. And that does seem to be what they're saying, which does seem likely given the current circumstances. And I think that's what the challenge is in that area. And I think that there's probably only so much they can do in terms of keeping on top of that. And if it continues to be a problem, we may see that continues to be a performance issue. just the sheer number of the sheer amount of work they're getting. I mean, we can certainly ask them to comment on that, but I think it's probably that fluctuation. There's certain times of year they're more likely to get fluctuations. For example, around Christmas, you get a lot of change because people get Christmas jobs. It's that type of thing. But we may find that there's an ongoing problem because as we're entering a bit of a recession, we find that people are very affected. They're having to change jobs a lot. They get a lot of changes. And so I think that we'll ask them to give us some feedback, but I've got a feeling that might continue to be a problem over the next few months. And we may see that continues. I don't think it reflects poorness in performance of the service. I do think it reflects increased demand.
One of the main reasons is most people now, including the housing benefit, paid by universal credit. Once you get variations from universal credit, when people are putting their application in, will take anything from a week up to 6 weeks before they get the money. On top of that, we pay discretionary benefit on council tax, on rent, on some of that kind of stuff. Those people can't get that discretionary benefit till the universal credit is sorted out. So you're paying in arrears, waiting for the universal credit to be done before you can determine whether you're going to give discretionary benefit as well. And that causes a big hiatus and it causes us problems. Because if someone gets sanctioned, and a lot of people get sanctioned on the universal credit, how do you carry on paying your discretionary benefit when someone's been sanctioned by universal credit? Because it all gets paid in one payment. And some of them are still entitled to the discretionary, because that's a rent top up or council tax top up, but they're not getting the universal credit, so they get nothing. And that causes all sorts of problems for us. That's what that's about. It's how we need a system. A universal credit talk to us a lot more. I mean, they send a £500,000 check in every, instead of paying weekly or monthly, they might send us £500,000 after 3 months. That's the back payments for universal credit. It's the way they operate. But it's unfair on the residents, it's unfair on the people, it's unfair on the council. The only thing what's going to change that will be a change in government. That's how simple it is.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that explanation. I thought there was some of that behind it. I guess what worried me when I looked at the figures is what are we going to try and do to make it any better? I'm afraid that we're going to be stuck, whether we like it or not. We're going to be stuck with what we got now. So we need to somehow have a plan, because otherwise we'll carry on having this situation, which then just causes the unit and us as a council generally the problem. And that figure looked very poor when I looked at the results.
But so, David, it does say that they've actually additionally temporary resources have been deployed to mitigate the fluctuation in claim levels. So they're actually doing what they've done all along for as long as I can remember. When I was portfolio holder, they pulled in temporary people in to try and even that out.
Thank you, Chair. But the answers I've just been given have given me no confidence that what's been done so far is going to fix the problem.
To Nicky Middleton, she's found ways to pay people direct now. So if someone qualifies for, especially with the fuel cards and the discretionary fuel benefit, electric benefit, and that, she's found a way to pay them direct. So it's not gone into the universal credit payment. She'll send them a voucher, I believe it is, direct to them through the post or through an email, and that way they aren't getting caught up. The universal credit, if they're sanctioned, they're getting directed. They can use that voucher in a lot of the local shops to buy the energy top-up cards and that kind of stuff. But by doing it direct to the people, we'll bypass basically universal credit.
Councillor, it's probably also worth adding that team does a lot of automation, and I know that they try to manage a lot of that influx of automation. I know they're doing further work around that, and they're looking to, for example, have an upgrade of their CRM, which is Workflow 360. So I think they do have plans in the medium term of how to manage this. But in the short term, they probably will just need to get extra resources to try to deal with it in the short term, which is they're very practiced at doing that when they've had to. But I think the long term is to improve the IT in that area, which I think will help. And as Councillor Shaw says, Nikki Middleton, the manager there, is very on top of it and is very aware of it. But would it be helpful if I asked her to, you know, because she's going to have a much better knowledge than others, shall I ask her to give us some further information about that?
I don't necessarily think that the further information is what I'm looking for. I guess I'm looking for just some sort of reassurance that we've got the thing under control, and that you, as the people that are actually involved in running this and fixing what looked like a poor performance figure, are happy that things are going to get better rather than staying as bad as they appear at the moment.
I think we probably need to monitor it and see what happens. And it may be a flux, and it may be fine, and it may settle down. I think we need to monitor it and see. But I will emphasise to the managers in that area to make sure that they give us as much explanation as possible, so that to talk about how they're going to manage that for future reports. But we may find it's fine next quarter. So I think if we come back to it next quarter, and we'll see how it's doing.
Any other questions? Can I just say thank you for the glossary at the back, and can we keep that in on it? Because it really is useful, because I can't remember what it was, I wasn't sure what it meant, and I just went to the back 2 pages and I thought, I don't even need to ask at the meeting, I've got the answer there. So if you could keep that in on every report that you bring to the council, I'd much appreciate it.
Yes, and we do continuously update it with each quarter, so
Yeah.
we're definitely keeping that in.
Because as I say, it's useful. It means that I can understand what I'm reading. So I'd say thank you very much. I'm desperately trying to find the first page for a really useful report. And the recommendation is OSB is recommended to note the Q1 2022 to 23 outturn on performance. Is everybody agreed? Yeah. So thank you very much for everything. Now, next item is item 8. Now, I have a problem, Colin, with what the recommendation actually says. Because
I
when
can
it's
help you.
Applications of documents.
I can help you, Chair. Let me just help you, because I've picked up a little error. I'll have to apologise for that. So on the first report, it says on under 2, paragraphs 28 to 30. In fact, it's paragraphs 16 to 18. So I do apologise for confusing the Chair and the committee. If we could just make those amendments, it's actually 16 to 18, not 28 to 30. So that's probably why you are confused.
That makes sense, because that's what it is on agenda. The item 9 is those 3. Right. But as I say, I couldn't understand why I was curious. It just didn't make sense. Right. 16, 17 and 18 are the right ones, the right numbers. It did mean, that was why I asked the question.
Chair, I was looking at the other report when I fed back to committee.
Yes, but before you start your presentation, now on the 1st of October, now I've forgotten the terminology for the gas you've got the fire alarms, you've got the gas ones. As from the 1st of October, it is mandatory to have them in all social housing. I know this isn't the 1st of October here, that's in advance, but it is going to be law then. Do we need to add that into these 2 documents? No, thank you. I got the carbon, but it was a bit whether it was monoxide.
do the inspections for the fire safety under the right. So the tenants will go along with the fire brigade and the fire safety officers to do the inspections on their own properties.
Right. It was just a case of, as I say, it was mandatory, and I just wondered whether it was, should it be in this report? I know we're halfway through September, but it should be included in both these reports.
I don't think we can put the nominated opposite yet, what the white paper calls for. But that'll be in train over the next few weeks. So we can tell everything the white paper calls for.
Right. Thank you, Don. Now, can we clarify? One is for HMOs, which is the second one, and this is for rented accommodation, the first one.
Chair, I'll clarify when I do my, I'll clarify when I do my
Right.
short presentation.
If you could, please, because as I say, I worked that out, but I think I've got it the right way around, but just to make sure that everybody's is on the same page. Over to you, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Colin Moon, Service Director for Housing. I also got Dave Stevenson, who's the private sector guru on Teams. They've contracted COVID, so he's unable to be here today, but if he can speak, I hope he can. He'll answer every single one of your questions. So, Chair, thank you. You probably would have recalled seeing a similar report like this last year. And so we're here again with additional licensing. So additional licensing, we've got a statutory HMO or housing multiple occupation scheme already. It's a law. It's alleged. It's by law. So all properties with 5 or more people in occupation, we've got to license those properties, or landlords must come forward to license their properties. Not everybody does, of course. So this report is proposing an additional licensing scheme, which is all other houses in multiple occupation across the town. So hopefully that clarifies that for you, Chair. It's HMOs, but not 5 or more people. It's less than that, but it's all HMOs across the town. We've got a statutory scheme already by law, and this is covering the additional properties not covered by that scheme, because that's for 5 or more people, and this is for less. So, Chair, I said before, we came to you last year. The recommendation for this report is for yourselves to comment on the recommendations, because this report is going to executive on the 10th of October. It's for you to comment on the report, and we're suggesting or proposing that we go for consultation. Last year, we went for an additional and selective licensing scheme, and we got reviewed judicially. And I'm just going to step through the reasons why we had a judicial review from landlords. Under 8, Chair of the report, it tells you why, what the judicial review is all about. The first one was that the consultation was improperly conducted and had not properly authorised by executive, did not reach persons likely to be affected. And what they're referring to there is that we held some meetings online on Teams in the height of COVID, and they had exceptions to that. They also said that we didn't recommend appropriately to the executive. Essentially, officers made the decision. That's what that is all about. The second one was that potentially unlawful conditions were imposed by the scheme. And I will say to the committee that most of the objections, frankly, were very, very debatable. Very, very debatable. We didn't just fall over on these recommendations, these points, these appeals, but I'll come to that later. The third one was that there was a lack of impartiality or proper debate at executive and this committee when considering the decision taken to implement the scheme. So those who took out the appeal looked at the recordings and made a decision that actually there wasn't sufficient debate, and that was their prerogative to do. 4, that there were procedural irregularities in the committee process, including that no impact assessment was presented to executive. So we referred to the impact assessment in the report, but we didn't present it to executive. That the BRE report and the data on which it is based is old. It's a 3-year report. we're reporting stuff from the census 10 years ago. So, you know, all this stuff is quite dubious as far as we're concerned. That the two schemes are not distinct from one another. The schemes are statutorily distinct. So basically they're saying we actually brought a report with additional licensing, selective licensing. It was one report, and they've got a point there. It should have been two separate reports. So we've rectified that. That insufficient financial evidence was provided during the consultation to the OSB and the executive, and you know, so many of these points, Chair and committee, are very dubious. We had the same, not the same, but we had a challenge the previous year when we were going to introduce licensing, and we've had a challenge this time round. So we are starting again, essentially. And we're proposing the additional licensing scheme. We've dealt with a number of the issues that the judicial review pointed out. We don't agree with all of them, but we've still dealt with some of the main ones. And essentially, Chair, we're proposing that you comment, you have a conversation about this, and you make any comments that you feel we should make to executive. But this will be going to executive on the 10th of October. And Chair, please, any questions? I've got Dave Stevenson on Teams. Councillor Shaw, you may want to say something.
Can I just ask, because I was slightly confused when I looked at the title of both of the reports. So my old, brain gets a little bit confused. Could they pick that up, that the name of the report doesn't explain in noddy terms, I would call it, really. If they're picking us up on various things, that we could make that more, instead of additional licensing, sort of, make the differentiation between the two. I just wonder, given what went to a judicial review, I'm just trying to anticipate what they might. Because it's highly likely, because they don't want it, so they'll, possibly we face another judicial review. So let's preempt.
Chair, we look at the titles of the report. I mean, the only thing I will say that the titles have already gone to executive, but we can look at the titles of the report. Chair,
it's just a suggestion, because I just think that that was one of their complaints.
Yeah.
I think that united the committee accepting anything like that today, because I'm sure they want our next report to be more for time.
But this is why I'm actually saying, because I was slightly confused until I actually started reading it. Then it became obvious that there was a difference, but it wasn't in the title, is what I'm actually saying.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is, I mean, licensing, generally speaking, can be confusing. The additional licensing is about HMOs. The report that's also on your committee later on is selective licensing, which is in a defined area, and it's all private rented properties. Now, if you're not in the business, you're not going to know that. So we will work on the report, and we'll.
That's where I'm coming from. That we could possibly understand it, but this is the general public, and also seeing they picked it up before a judicial review. I think we've got to be doubly careful. Right, hold on before I finish speaking. And now, if we use the same BRE report, are they going to say the same thing? And have we got the justification for using that information? Sorry if I'm hogging it.
So, Chair, I believe that irrespective of how watertight this report is and the other report, we're going to get a judicial review. Just the conversations we have with landlords and their general unhappiness around introducing licensing, it was obvious. So obviously 2 years ago, there was a judicial review. Last year or this year, there was a judicial review. So we are expecting there to be another judicial review once we've gone through a consultation period. If executive agree that, we believe there's going to be. What we've done is that we've closed down a lot of the issues that they raised initially. And if they raise those issues again, so for example, the BRE report, that's 3 years old. As I said earlier, we are working generally on census information that's 10 years old.
I agree with what you're saying, but it's just a case of, like Tom says, we want to make this as watertight as possible. And I think we've got to come from a public's perspective, not a member's perspective where these two reports are concerned. And I think the answers to the surveys, the various points, I think that's very useful as well. I found that very useful actually in what you were actually saying, X, Y, Z.
Chair, just to answer that question on the BRE report, I think the BRE report is quite sound. Not much has changed in the private sector since the time that report was gone. So if they do raise that as an objection, you know, we'll say, yeah, thank you, Bob.
Right, Councillor Ackley, I'm finished, unless I think of something different.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment. I'm sure you've looked at everything and dot your I's and cross your T's this time. But my concern is we are not the first people to have done this. So have we gone to those who have money to do this and learn a lesson as to how they're able to beat those people and gotten this through? If not, why aren't we poaching their lawyers or whoever is advising them to do what we need to do to pass it? Because it would be a shame if we have to pull it again. So to me, I think we need to make sure not this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Just on that then, we have spoken to a number of local authorities and also we've had quite a lot of conversations with council and legal. So we think we're on the right track. So before we closed down a lot of the issues that existed before, but we, you know, I can probably guarantee we're going to get another judicial review. But we're much better placed now to deal with it because some of the areas, you know, we made some errors. You know, we combined both reports. They should have been separate. We accept that. The equality impact assessment was, the impact assessment was referred to, but it wasn't attached as an appendix. We've done that this time. So we've gone through all of the objections and we looked at them. Some of them are very spurious and we're not going to be able to do anything about those because they're just spurious. You know, it depends on your view about A to B. We think we're on very sound ground, but we're going to get a judicial review. So we'll definitely be up for fighting it this time if that does happen.
Well, have you spoken to their lawyers or whoever and said, look, what do we need to do to get this through so that there's not a public spark in the parish?
Yeah, we've spoken to council.
Can I ask you, I mean, did we at the last one, did we have any sort of legal expert or consultant involved in the last one? And if we did, are we sort of having a similar sort of situation this time? And the last one is, what was the actual cost of all that before it was abandoned? How much did it cost really before it was abandoned?
So yes, we went through legal. Yes, we employed consultants to carry out the consultation. And the recommendation for executives is if we should go through another process of consultation, that consultation cost about 30 grand. It will probably cost a little bit more given things are going up and et cetera, et cetera.
In light of the situation we are at the moment with the constraint on the budget, you know, and there is obviously judicial review, but in terms of all those, you know, everybody's talking about watertight. How much watertight can you make? But it is sometimes the obvious points that one does think that has not been covered. Then I think that needs to be done at this stage so that we don't have the embarrassing situation what we faced the last time. Yeah,
Councillor, we believe we've got that.
Yeah,
But
we need to be reassured.
Yeah, I believe we have done that. But I'm the landlords we have. Some of the landlords, I shouldn't say all of them, but some of the landlords we have in Luton are absolutely dead against having a licensing scheme in this borough. And that's just from a purely selfish point of view, because some of them have got quite a lot of properties and they'll have to, it'll cost them a bit of money, although the actual license fee is only around £488 for a license for 5 years. It's not that much, but there are some landlords who've got quite a lot of properties in the borough. So we've done all we can, in my view. We've consulted our legal experts, we consulted counsel. Some of these points are very spurious and frankly, in our view, don't have a lot of weight. However, because of a few of them that did, we've decided that we had to stand down the designation and we started again. So,
which is in terms of number of the landlords were saying to members, particularly, that we did tell you these are the reason and you shouldn't go ahead with it. Why didn't you listen to us? I think with hindsight, everybody can be clever, but it was pretty embarrassing to say to them. They kept repeating it to us. Well, we did tell you these are the problems that you need to sort out, and you still went ahead with it. And then at the end, you had to withdraw. So I think I'm coming from that in terms of getting that bit, so that if they are talking about it now in terms of the consultation, and they do bring out some extra points, then we need to get that right, so that before we do the final thing and go ahead with it. Yeah.
totally agree with your counsel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think main points have been covered by colleagues, but I was just reading through the judicial review document on Appendix B, and from page, I suppose paragraph 66 onwards, or even previous to that, it keeps obviously the application keeps, the judicial review grounds keep talking about the fee structure for both schemes and the fact that they weren't separate, they were together. But then I don't know, I just get a bit confused in paragraph 69, where obviously they're talking about a licensing fee being made up of two parts. All right, the first is £122, which covers the processing of an application, which is non-refundable, and then the remainder of the fees is the monitoring and enforcement. But then it just gets a bit confusing for me, because they keep talking as though that fee plus this additional the remainder of the cost for the monitoring and enforcement is basically an upfront fee as opposed to two separate fees. So it just gets a bit confusing. And obviously they keep referencing, there is a reference on page on paragraph 70 and 71 to obviously case law here as well. And then obviously it talks about a threshold, but I don't know what that threshold is. I mean, is that within the case law itself, or is that based on a calculation that we've done? I don't know. It's just confusing, this document, I mean, these paragraphs.
Yeah, I'm going to bring David in a second, give David an opportunity to say something, that's if he can speak. The fee is £488 in total for a 5-year license. But what we've done, we've split it into two sections just to be a bit transparent. So part one covers the processing of the application, which will be collected upon application, and part two covers monitoring and enforcement. So, Dave, can you just give a better explanation why we split it that way, please?
Yeah, hold on. Hopefully you can see me and hear me. We used to have the fee set up as one fee, whereby we would collect all the money at the first point of contact. There was some case law which came out which said actually it should be split. The fee should be made up of two parts, which was part of the application, and the second part is the monitoring and the enforcement. The case law didn't go as far as saying that you had to actually collect the two fees separately. So we had it set up as one sum to be collected right at the very beginning, and then we would give a refund if the application didn't go ahead. However, in view of the comments in the judicial review, we have moved ahead with setting it up as a two-part fee and collected in 2 stages. Although we suspect some of the landlords will probably still pay in one lump sum up front.
When I come in with this, I just had a quick look at the item 9, and I can't find the HMO license fees, which is in item 8, and that's got mandatory and additional HMO and early bird fee additional licensing. That's in item 8 on the agenda, but I can't find that same page in 9.
Chair, just a little bit of advice, please. Can we deal with them separately?
Well, all I'm saying is
Yeah.
it's just something I've picked up because I went to check to see if the wording was anything different to what was in that one. That was all I was doing.
Okay, Chair, it should be the same wording because essentially the fees are
But
going to
I
be.
can't find that report in. Oh, yes.
But Chair, a lot of paper's been shuffling around on these 2 reports specifically, so it could have been omitted. So I apologise for that, Chair.
Right, that's okay. It was just a case of I wondered if it was changed wording, that was all. And
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in?
Oh,
There are some of the appendices, due to their various sizes, they were not printed out as part of the agenda. Some of those appendices have online access only, and Colin is aware of this. So perhaps it's probably one of those appendices that you're referring to that is not present as the agenda pack.
thank you. Okay, go on. Sorry about that.
Secretary, I think we've finished. If there are any other questions?
Any more questions?
Yeah. Just looking through the report, I'm sure it's covered, but I'd just like some reassurance. It seems to me that part of the legal, the judicial review outcomes, we're talking about reports being out of date. It strikes me that even using the BRE report, that if I've understood correctly is dated 2019, and there is also a whole series of other things. I'm just concerned, I suppose, that the data on which we've pulled this report together, and as we'll be going forward, will not be subject to the same judicial outcome, because at face value, I think we're still open to the fact that some of the data is out of date.
Chair, as I said before, we rely on 10-year information from the census, for example. So for me, 3 years is not an unreasonable amount of time. The private sector, although it has been growing, it's not going to change that significantly in that level of time. Some of these points are very, very dubious, and they just threw everything into the pot, in my view. What we are recommending, and obviously it's for executive to make that decision, is conducting another consultation exercise. Because I think if we can conduct another consultation exercise, they really aren't going to have much room. If we go out with the same consultation that we did last year, then it may be an argument that you've relied on consultation you did last year in COVID, which is a point they've raised, and you didn't reach everybody, which is a point they've raised. So for me, to cover that off, I feel, and I will recommend that executive that give us the agreement to conduct another consultation. Dave, have you got anything you want to add on that particular point around the data?
I think you're right. I mean, the BRE report was completed and given to us in December 2019. And really, in relation to all these sort of date issues and the age of the data, I think it's inevitable that whenever we rely on some data, people will almost certainly say, well, actually, it's getting a bit out of date. The report does identify a number of other documents and publications which are in the pipeline, which might give us some more information, might assist executive making a decision, but there's really sort of no sort of timescales or guarantees when that information will arrive or how useful it will be when it does.
Okay, well, if you're happy with that, you know the detail and I don't. If I look at some of the other documents, if I just pick up a couple of things, either as comments or questions as you see fit. On my documents, at least on page 95, it's saying that, and I quote, the license holder must ensure that each tenant is made aware in written format that they are responsible for their own behaviour and the behaviour of other occupiers and visitors. There's no way that one tenant can be responsible for the behaviour of other occupiers. It's going to fail. The second one on the same page, just to try and keep us to one page at a time, also on my page 95, it's saying the license holder must obtain references for all prospective tenants. I just worry, Tom, you have more experience of this than me. Is an HMO tenant liable to be able to have these references?
Agreement, we make our tenants responsible for visitors to the property. If those visitors undertake antisocial behaviour while they're in their property, it can lead, it hasn't done, but it can lead to eviction proceedings. I will say, just as a matter of point, I'm not going to get involved in the main part of the question in case someone says that the judicial review that Tom Shaw already made his mind up. So I'm not going to get, but I will say, don't be scared of the judicial review, because we've got, at the moment, we've got a peer challenge going on in the town hall, an housing peer challenge. The council from the portfolio of thousands in Bristol is facing exactly the same problem down there, where they're trying to fetch it in. The London Brothers not fetched it in. Some of them faced exactly the same problem as well. All it is I believe that Colin and the solicitors and Mark are trying to cover all the bases to make sure we can go out for a proper consultation exercise and make an independent decision when we get the results of that consultation exercise back, which will be completely relevant to the consultation exercise. I hope that's taped somewhere so the lawyers can hear that.
And you're right, in social housing, it's been part of the tenancy agreement and it's part of antisocial behaviour law that if you've got a tenant and they've got people visiting them and they're antisocial, that we can actually deal with them. And it's not unreasonable for us to expect in the private sector, because we're trying to raise standards and we get lots of complaints about antisocial behaviour and people visiting people and us not being able to do anything about it. It's reasonable for us to want to raise that particular issue standard in the private sector.
I think my comment has been taken out of context. I'm absolutely in favour of trying to get in the expansion to this HMO right across the town. My concern was only that one tenant can't necessarily be held legally accountable for the behaviour of other tenants in an HMO environment, because you have two people with effectively separate contracts therefore the one can't be legally responsible for the other. Now, the only other comment that I think would be worthwhile saying at this point is that during other parts of the report, there are references being made to the current HMO, which is for the larger number of people. My concern is that we need to be very careful if we are drawing close comparisons between an HMO with a great number of people and the smaller number of people that we're talking about in this extension. Because again, I think if we try and draw too close a comparison, for example, on antisocial behaviour, my feeling is that we will again be opening ourselves up to challenge if we draw too much of a parallel and say, because this level of ASB happens in a big HMO, it'll happen in a small HMO. And my only concern here is that we really do have to try and make sure that we get this one through this time. That's really all I'm concerned about, and I can go on about the individual detail, but that won't serve any useful effect in this meeting.
Thank you. I mean, just to answer that, if that for you, Chair, most of the comparison really is about numbers. You know, we're saying, you know, statutory HMO licensing exists, but there are lots of properties, 3,000, whatever it is, where we can't license because we have no scheme. So having a scheme put in place will cover 3,000 plus additional properties. And by the way, we do know that there's antisocial behaviour, there's fly tipping, there are these other issues because we get complaints regularly from that particular cohort of properties, if you like. And it's not drawing the comparison, it's merely saying there's a swathe of properties that are not licensed, and we need to cover those off in order to start raising the standards in that part of HMO land.
I've got a question, Colin. They criticise us for not challenging the costs, but how can we actually do that? There doesn't seem to be in the licensing fee, because that's what is one of the things. It's only, there's figures there, but I don't see how we could question those figures because we haven't got any alternative other than accepting those figures. Do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, totally, Chair. And as I said right at the beginning, many of the points raised through the judicial review are very spurious, and you know, anybody can say something about something that's written down and have a view about it. Our view is that we're transparent. The costs are there. The licensing fee is quite clear. We say, generally speaking, how much, you know, how many HMOs may come forward as a result, and selective licensing on the other report may come forward as a result of us putting in a scheme. And we're quite clear it's going to be over 100K in 1 year, possibly over 5 years, 500K, and that will be able to buy us X amount of staff in order to manage this process. So we've been clear. We think that's spurious. We'll put the same stuff forward and we'll take it from there. So I'm not, they haven't said specifically what we should have put forward. Yeah, the consultation's a consultation, and we've spent 30K on it.
Yeah, but effectively they're saying that OSB and the exec didn't query the costs.
Well,
we accepted them.
Yeah.
And that's why what I'm trying to is remedy that particular accusation to both the exec and to OSB.
So I think, Councillor, what we need to do, for the executive report, just add a bit of information in that executive report.
Well, can you make sure that OSB
Absolutely.
knows what you're adding to the
so we'll refer back to the 30 grand that we spent for the last consultation, and we'll probably say it's going to be probably around 45 to 50K with some additions for the consultation. And that depends how extensive the consultation will be, because the executive may suggest that we have a shortened version of the consultation, or the 10-week
Yeah.
consultation. So it does
But
depend.
what I'm saying about is about the licensing fee. We've got no, it's a case of these are the figures. Are they justified on page 151?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think we can probably add something in the report to say that I've got information just the other day that I think in Birmingham or one of those places, the licensing fee was £700 for a 5-year licensing fee. So we probably can add something more. I think it's buried in the report somewhere, Chair. So
Just as I say, it's just one thing that
I agree that when it goes to the executive, before we go after the consultation,
you need the figures.
The fees in that part of that consultation.
So
Yeah.
whatever you do for executive, can I have the same wording brought back to OSB so that we can actually make sure it's minuted? Because as Tom says, he would be asking the same question as what I am. Yes, Councillor Rizzi. I'm looking at page 147, by the way.
It'll be a quick answer to this one. So in the proposal for this new consultation, what would be the time frame that we're looking at dates wise? I mean, just as an indication, I guess.
great question. There is no timescale at the moment in this current report. It does depend what executives say. Same timescale for the previous consultation. That's a 10-week consultation. That will probably take us to, if executive then agree based on the consultation that we should go ahead, that's looking like a June go live. That depends on a number of steps, including procuring someone to do the consultation, bringing it back to executive after the consultation's over, the designation, which takes around 3 months, and then after the designation, completing the rest of the work that needs to be done, looks like a June. And I will add this into the executive report as well. So, but executive may say, you need to go faster. And then we will then have to have a conversation about procurement, because I think at the beginning of the process, we've got to go out there to the market and get a consultant. That's the procurement process. That could take us a little while. So if we can short circuit that, that will help us a great deal in getting a faster start. But for me, that's the biggest risk at the beginning.
And then I guess my only comment would be, Chair, is this obviously, the follow-on proposal, which is that the new consultation will incorporate online and in-person participation, so as to widen the opportunity for people to contribute. I mean, where do you strike a balance? Because it's a bit of a balancing exercise. That's going to be the challenge.
We had online participation
Yeah.
from landlords, and we had one landlords forum that was online, absolutely, and we had some drop-in sessions. And I think, hindsight's a great start thing. As far as we're concerned, we complied with COVID regulations at the time. It's a bit of a spurious point, and frankly, so yeah, we will make sure that we will mix it up more, because we didn't actually have any face-to-face.
So I suppose maybe I didn't phrase that properly. For example, hypothetically speaking, would it be a mixture of, I don't know, 5 online events for people to participate with 5 in person? That's the sort of thing. Where do you strike the balance? Because I guess there could be an additional concern raised afterwards to say there weren't very many face-to-face opportunities. There were, proportionately 60% done online, which didn't give us a fair opportunity to do it if we wanted to do it in person. I guess, if that makes any sense.
It makes lots of sense, but it's also about promotion, and we promoted this. We letter dropped.
I know, exactly. Yeah.
To lettings agents, we sent information out when we were sending out emails and letters, directing people to the consultation. So we don't believe we could have done more around promotion, but obviously lessons learned. We'll just work a bit harder.
And please do ensure that obviously when you are, feeding back to executive in the report, that you obviously, have a clear strategy in there as to, how, what additional steps, I guess, from the lessons learned, you'll be taking to ensure that obviously there is a lot of publicity and promotion around the consultations, and especially so that it can't come back to us and, you know, with a follow-on judicial review, for example, saying that you didn't actually, you know, push it hard enough, we didn't know about this, etc., etc. So just to make sure that social media and however you're going to advertise this, that people are aware of the consultation, and we've explored all avenues to do so. Thanks.
Finally, Colin, I've got one more question. It's about what the publication of the documents described, paragraph 16 to 18. And if you look at 17, the health, disability and unpaid care could be roughly January next year. What's the time? I'd written it on 9, but I didn't know about 8, so I'll ask the question here. What's the timescale for these reports, and how will that, as I say, that lot in 17 affect what the executive decides to do?
Thanks, Chair. We were merely saying that there will be additional information out that could impact the data that we've presented. We've said in 16 about the additional information that's available now. So the consultation and the documents that go forward for executive, not this executive, but the executive after, where we hopefully will get a decision to go forward, we'll have some of this new information. But under 17, a lot of that stuff is November to December, way off. We may not get that information back in time to include in this, but we will get some additional information going forward. But
you're asking us to accept those dates because that's not what's in your recommendation. That's my problem with your recommendation, Colin.
Yeah, I think we just...
I think that needs to be, from me, I don't know how the other members feel, given that we're going to go to exec, there should be something in there to say about not all of the reports will be available, or something to that effect.
Yeah, we were saying that some of the information from the census has already been released.
Yeah, but Colin, I'm talking about the recommendation, not what's in 17. Your recommendation is to proceed with a new consultation following the publication of the documents described at paragraphs 16 to 18. It's that recommendation all along which has been my problem.
But now, I think the chair is 100% right, because what could happen, someone could come back and say on a judicial review that the scrutiny committee made their recommendation without having the full facts in front of them. So that recommendation,
that's where I'm coming from, Tom. As I say, it's not about the report, it's what we're being recommended. You know, what the recommendation is my, all along has been my concern throughout this.
It's not up to me,
but I'm glad
if I was on this scrutiny committee, I would want that changed to when all information is available and decisions have been made by the executive, a report at the earliest opportunity is given back to this scrutiny committee to agree or disagree with the outcomes of the consultation.
Yeah, I think that. Do you all agree with that?
Yeah, literally took the words out of my mouth, pretty much.
That makes me more comfortable because I'm not agreeing to something that isn't. Yeah,
exactly, because I can see the first thing someone throwing in a judicial chat and saying, well, OSB said they want all the data because of the way the recommendation's written. They want all the data from 17 published before we move forward.
Yeah,
and we haven't had that because it's not till January. Well, if we change it to an understanding of that within the recommendation, that closes another loophole.
Yes, Councillor Hussain.
Difficulty with that is that once you'd agreed the date at the executive, yes, in terms of the consultation and all that, the period, then coming back here is a little bit too late, isn't it? I mean, the decision is made, and the decision has to, if it is, then the decision of the executive, it has to come to the committee first before the executive makes the decision. So that if there is anything that we, a member of OSB, wish to make, we could do that once the decision is made. What is the point of bringing?
If I could help, Chair, and I'm only trying to assist, Councillor Hussein's wrong. The only decision will be made by the executive is to go out to consultation. In that period, it can come back. We would not dream of making a decision on whether to go ahead with the licensing scheme till the consultation period is finished. That gives us whatever 6, 8 or 10 weeks while the consultation exercise is going on to come back here with all the information you've just required.
To proceed with a new consultation, yeah, but following the publication of the documents described at paragraphs 16 to 18. So we need.
So basically what we want to do is change the recommendation to basically scrub. We want the recommendation to executive is to authorise officers to proceed with a new consultation with full stop, new sentence, after it, in respect to it coming back to OSB after consultation and the publication of documents described at paragraphs 16 to 18. That covers us.
It's what new consultation
Yeah,
that
what
bothers
I'm
me
saying,
in that
I haven't got it
recommendation.
wrong.
I agree with what you're saying, but we're saying it. If we said, right, I would be happy if it said described as paragraphs 16 and 18, comma 17, paragraph 17. Now, what's the word in yeah, but yes. If we said to the new consultation statement that paragraph 16 and 18 we're happy with, but you can go out with 16 and 18, but 17, paragraph 17, come back to us.
We can get rid of 17. We can rely on 16 because that information is available now.
And so is 18.
And so is some of 18. But the 17 is just about what's going to come out in the future.
Yeah.
It may not make any difference at all. We probably can scrub 17.
Because my concern about that was the reason I'm going along with what Colin is going to say. The first results on the population have been released, and all other main census 2021 data is intended to be published within 2 years of the census. Now that could be two years that you held up for that 17. So if we did 16 and 18 and just leave, you can leave 17 in the report, that's not a problem. But if we included that in the recommendation, it could hold up for 2 years, even irrespective of what we're making it more simple for the executive, aren't we? And 18.
Take 17 out, 16 and 18.
Only in the recommendation, 17 stays in the report.
Yep.
It's still there. But not, it's because it says with a new consultation. If it didn't say new consultation in that, I'd be quite happy to say what you say. But I'm concerned about.
The committee needs to move that item 17 taken out of the report.
Well, it doesn't make any difference if it's there. It can be there, left in there. We're not saying to the executive. We're only saying to the executive that it's 16 and 18 that must be. They must have those reports from those 2 paragraphs before they go out to consultation. Does everybody agree with?
isn't it? What said in the report, they've already got 16 and 18.
That's what I'm saying, they've
Yeah.
got 16 and 18, so we can say that the new consultation following the publication of the documents described at paragraphs 16 and 18. That's all we need to say. Everybody agreed with that? Let's keep things simple.
Chair, I'm just wondering if you would also ask that the paragraph 17 be reported to OSB in future.
Yeah, we could do that, couldn't we?
So you don't leave that out.
Yeah. Because that could go to, because,
It's not relevant, Chair, to be honest with you.
yeah, but
Is that because Chair, you could do that so that we don't completely ignore paragraph 17, because there's a lot of information on there.
yeah, but as I say, it could take up to 2 years for that to come.
Yeah. We could
And that's why I'm saying just ignore.
hold it. I'm on to.
I just want to keep it simple. Do we want to
I
put-
was happy with the original point
Right.
because
Do we want to put paragraph 17 on the work programme to be kept? Yes, sorry, councillor, saying you, but
Chair, what I was making is very clear. Consultation period is not the issue.
no.
The executive agreed. It's the final decision before it's made with recommendation after the consultation that it comes here before the executive agrees the final proposal.
Yeah.
So
right,
that's what I'm saying.
right.
That we need to do to get on with life. And then we can say, if we have any opinion after the consultation that we think probably this has been missed, or alternatively, we look at the more critical way before the executive. And if there is anything we can say for the executive to think again, to review it on this report, what it is in front of us, and then they can go ahead with it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but
Right?
we'd actually come back to.
At the
it would
moment,
come
we're
back-
getting technicality of wording on 16, 18. So can we move on to that and agree that we want to have a consultation at that
It's
stage
completed.
when
We
the
want it to come back to
consultation period
OSB.
is
But
Yeah.
it will do, because it would have to go to
Can
exec.
we do
anyway.
that? I don't know how the wording, I let to the other clever people to do the wording,
Right.
right?
We've
But that's
just
what
come
I'm-
up with the wording is that
Yeah,
after the after the consultation, we want an outcome of the consultation back to OSB before the exec makes a decision to implement it. We've got there. Can we do the same, make item 9 the same recommendation? But the numbers of the paragraphs will be different. In 9, it's 23 to 20.
that will be the 28 and 30, with 29 being the one we want to kind of alter to the same effect.
Yes. Thank you. 24 and 25.
Are we done with 8?
Yes. Right. So we're going to say that the Open Review and Scrutiny Board, we comment on the recommendation for the executive and the contents of the report. We've done that. And the recommendation to executive is to authorise officers to proceed with a new consultation following the publication of the documents described at paragraph 16 and 18. And when the survey is completed, what did I say?
By the outcome of the consultation, you reported back.
Yes, is everybody happy with that? And we'll
Yes.
we'll check the paragraphs on 9 and we'll use the same wording for 9.
Which is 28 and 30, I believe.
Right, everybody's agreed on that? Thank God for that.
Chair,
Right.
Chair, just a quick question. Are you, I need to present the report briefly
Yeah.
because
Oh, yes, all I was just saying is we're not going to go through the same, we're going to use the same recommendation just was checking the paragraph. Yeah.
Alan, be very brief on the next one.
Yes, I'm hoping you are.
Okay,
We're
so
going to be late as far as my standards are concerned.
concluded report 8, and then we're on to number 9 now. Thank you, Chair. So the report before you is about selective licensing. Now, selective licensing is about a specific designated area in the south of borough, and it's about licensing all of the private rented properties in the south of the borough, given the number of private rented sector properties in that area. So the recommendation is that Overview and Scrutiny are asked to comment on the recommendation for executive and the contents of the report. The recommendation to executive is to authorise officers to proceed with a new consultation following the publication of the documents described at paragraphs 23 to 25, and you want that amended to 23 and 25. Chair. So Chair, just to, if you don't mind, indulge me just for a few minutes. The previous designation for selective licensing was withdrawn after a judicial review, and the judicial review centred on the consultation they believed was improperly conducted. And had not been properly authorised by executive. That the potential unlawful conditions were imposed by the scheme, that there was a lack of impartiality or proper debate at executive and OSB when considering the decision. That was based on listening to recordings or watching the recordings, I suppose. That there were procedural irregularities in the committee process, including that no impact assessment was presented, although it was referred to in the report. That the BRE report and the data on which it was based is old. That the two schemes are not distinct from one another. The schemes are statutorily distinct and should have been addressed separately, and that's what we have done. And that insufficient financial evidence was provided during the consultation. So, Chair, that was the basis of the judicial review. We discussed with legal and with our counsel, and we believe we've closed all of the issues. As I said before, a number of these points were spurious. We stood down the designation based on the impact assessment not being part of the papers but being referred to. And I will, and also Dave, who hopefully still there, will take any comments, Chair, on this report.
Sorry. Are you taking into consideration the two things you've said you will do before it goes to exec, the costings and name?
So we will look at the titles of the report there. We will also look at the costings, and also that there will be a timeline in the report which talks about the potential consultation if executive agree and how long that potentially will take. Yeah,
that's okay. I just wanted it minuted that we've got it for this report as well.
Plus the recommendation, Chair, there will be an additional recommendation about bringing it back here before it goes back to executive after consultation, if executive are minded to agree that.
Yeah. Any questions on this report? So do I need to do the recommendation, haven't I? I've lost the page. Can you read the recommendation? Yeah, but for this one, oh, I've seen it, haven't I? Oh, yeah, look. And can we also have on this carbon monoxide alarms 1st of October in social housing in this one as well, please? I think it seems sensible to add it now rather than wait until the 1st of October. You know, it's just one of those. I actually found my wording. Right. Overview and Scrutiny Board are asked to comment on the recommendation for the Executive and the contents of the report. The recommendation to Executives is to authorise officers to proceed with a new consultation following the publication of the documents described at paragraphs 23 and 25. And you read the next bit out.
And the next one is about the outcome, reporting about the outcome back to OSB before it's been to Executive.
Everybody agreed with that?
Thanks, Dave. You can go now.
If I'm to understand, this was supposed to come back again. It was deferred the decision at the policy group on the library service. Is it not? Yeah. Those of you that were there, can you remember?
I think so, but I'm not quite. The officers here to.
Can somebody tell us that this library's one was that deferred so that it comes back with a certain question that could not be given? Is that right, or have I got that wrong?
I think on one of the original reports of this, there were some queries that needed to be, so they've been taken away and will be separate to this report.
Yeah. And that will be, those answers need to be given in terms of some of the issues that was there, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
I mean, I'm afraid I wasn't there. Those that were there, I'd been told that it was deferred, come back with some more answers. There was a huge amount of questions were asked.
Yeah, there was a segment of the original report.
You know, the reason I'm asking you, Chair, the meeting that we had in the policy group, number of issues were brought up in which the number of questions were asked, and then the answer need to come back with the officers, particularly the library points and all those other things that members wanted to have the answers, and members wanted to have a detailed report and in that sense. So what I'm saying is that if it is amendments to this report, is it asked for us to get a clarification of those questions, because and the decision was, final decision was that those things will come back to the, and then it will come to us here at the OSB. That's what I've been told. I wasn't there, but that's what I've been told. Yes?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if that's the case, is there any point us going through?
But it hasn't been
if there are
deferred.
questions that needs to be answered, and then the final report will go, that goes to the executive, will have to be amended.
The point which Councillor Hussain raises has been removed from the report and will be subject to a future report. So it's separate to that now.
So,
this
but
is
it's
around.
not removed from here, is it?
In terms of the proposals that we had originally, they have been removed, and
they're still here.
They shouldn't be in that report. They're in there.
But you're the officer given the report. Tell me, are they here or they
no?
Sorry, Chair, if I can just come in. I think that committee you're referring to, Councillor, is a separate process to this particular report that has come to OSB.
Yeah.
I think what the committee needs to do today is to consider the report as it's been presented, and then you can make your recommendations based on what has been presented. That other committee that you referenced is completely separate to this, and they won't link in terms of the report.
I'm looking at it,
because we're not meant to be discussing that.
Yes. The
You see what I mean?
clarification I'm looking at, we haven't got a legal officer here. If something in the report is going to be removed, we need to know what is going to be removed and what we're not going to consider here. We
I
can't
think you
consider
can-
something that is not going to be in the
Yeah.
final report that goes to the executive.
Yeah, but I think you can have that conversation based on the content of what the officer will be reporting today, rather than what has been discussed in a separate process, if you see what I mean. Because that cannot link. This is a public meeting or a meeting in public, and the conversation you had, I think that is more of a private conversation.
I'm not discussing the confidential nature of it. All I'm discussing, the facts in front of us, are they correct?
Well,
If they're not, then, you know, if it's amended report,
well,
then amended
well,
report.
Brian,
should be
I
in
will
front
turn
of
it
us.
on the,
If the officer is saying the report is amended, and that's what in front of us is correct, then we would go ahead and look at it, yes?
Yeah, that's the understanding that we
So
took
it's
from
amended
that.
report.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's what I'm asking for. Simple, straightforward question.
right. Let's start. We've had enough fun and games tonight, please. We've
Chair.
had to work hard.
Chair, if I can just step in, I mean, Councillor, my colleague makes a very important point here on that. I mean, and obviously it's not in terms of discussing something that was separately discussed. It's just making sure that what we have this evening in front of us is the true and correct report, so that we can obviously discuss it and, you know, reach the end conclusion that that needs to be reached. But based on this report.
But as far,
Yeah, so if it is, then that's fine. But obviously, yeah, I completely agree with, you know,
but
what my
that's
colleague was
totally
trying to
separate.
get to.
As far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned,
Yes, this is the report.
this is the report.
Yeah, no,
we're
that's
dealing
fine.
with.
No, but that's fine. But like I said, that was a valid point.
End of
in its
story.
way. But yeah, anyway, let's proceed. Thank
If
you.
what you were alluding to, if you had seen it in here when you read the report, I would have expected you either to contact me or your leader to say that report is going to OSB. Our discussion of the other night, that's where I think the conversation you're having now should have been outside this meeting. Right? Which one of you is doing the report? Right.
Matthew.
Right, Matthew. Item 10.
Hi. Hi, good evening. Thank you, Chair. Matthew Hudson, a Public Health Principal at the Council. So this evening we're looking at the library service recommendations. So currently we've just completed some time ago now, we completed our first phase of consultation. So today we're asking overview and scrutiny to note the responses to the phase 1 consultation and to look at the
Forgot to say, in the recommendations, I feel that we'll note the procurement and approach and timeline, but I think it should go to FRG for procurement and figures like that. The costing should go to FRG. Sorry, Matthew, but I meant to say it at the beginning of the report to make sure that everybody, so we'll note the recommendation 6, but then refer the procurement approach and timeline to FRG. Right? Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you. Yes. So we're looking to OSB to endorse us to move to the second phase of consultation. We too are due to go to executive on the 10th of October to get permissions to go out to the second phase of consultation on the libraries. So the libraries play a crucial role in the council's achieving its vision of 2040, and we believe that the library service has a key role in us building back better following the pandemic. In terms of the background, libraries are a statutory duty. We have to provide those as a council in accordance with the 1964 Libraries and Museum Act, where all councils in England have the statutory to provide a comprehensive and efficient library service for all those who visit, live, work and study in their areas. So for us in Luton, A comprehensive service has broadly been defined as something that is accessible, and that's by using appropriate means, so in public transport, as well as considering the digital element of the library service. And efficient has been broadly defined as utilising or ensuring value for money within the service and the assets available to it. We currently have our library strategy, which aims to provide an aspiring library service shaped by the community. There are 4 key strategic priorities within that strategy currently, obviously as part of this ongoing consultation, and as part of some of the discussions that happened on the previous page, obviously to ensure we don't face judicial review, is to make sure that we engage with our communities and make sure the library is reflective of our community. So in terms of our current position, the library service transferred over to Active Luton on the 1st of April 2020, which coincided with obviously the pandemic coming in and the restrictions that were applied nationally, which unfortunately meant that a library service in terms of its physical offering had to close. That service was then extended until the end of this financial year, on the 31st of March 2023. We have no option to extend that, and in terms of public contract regs, we are required to go out to procurement on that and test the market. So the role in the council in terms of how the library service is provided is depending on how much they determine is to be spent. But as we've just alluded to, I think at the beginning of this meeting, that might be for a separate committee to explore further. In terms of library usage, the library attendance in Luton had been declining up until the pandemic, and then we saw, as you would imagine, a cliff edge when the libraries did close. Conversely, we did see an increase in the digital uptake of the library service, as you can see in terms of the figure 1 there, the declining in terms of physical visits, but the sharp increase in physical visit, and then the sharp increase in digital issuing within the library service. The graph at the bottom shows a bit more the recovery period through or post the pandemic. So the red bars indicate the financial year of 2021 to 22. As you can see, a gradual recovery coming into then the blue bars at 22-23 financial year. As you can see, we've also included the 2019-20 financial year in the green bars, which shows where the levels were prior to the pandemic. So you see there is a gradual recovery taking place at the moment. I think it's noteworthy to say, given that the access to libraries on a physical basis was declining, we're not sure whether they will fully return and recover to the pre-pandemic levels. As obviously, as you can see through the digital graph on there, the middle one, there are still a lot of people who are using the digital service. Essentially, both of these, all these graphs illustrate that there is a need for both versions of our library in terms of having both a physical and a digital offer, and how we can provide and ensure that's meeting the needs of our community is through our consultations. So in terms of the first phase of the consultations findings, we did this from December 2021 through to the end of February 2022. For those who can remember, we were unfortunately under Plan B restrictions at that point, which meant we probably didn't get as great a response as we were expecting. We received in the end 496 responses in total to the initial phase of the consultation, the majority of those being existing library users at 94%. Also, the majority of respondents being those that identify as female at 66%, and with the majority being white British ethnicity at 68%. There was a strong representation from those aged between 41 and 70 years, which made up around 50% of respondents. And we noted that there was quite a low response from our children and young people at 2%, as well as those aged 18 to 40 years at 19%. We also noted that the highest rate of responses that we received were from the LU2 areas, and then secondly to that were the LU3 areas. In terms of the findings, obviously I can appreciate that the reports that we provided give more of a comprehensive overview, so hopefully you've all had an opportunity to look through those. But more broadly, in terms of areas of importance, and what we found, that book browsing and borrowing still remains the #1 priority for those accessing the libraries, as well as a space to sit and do research and relax, as well as accessing services such as printing, Wi-Fi, and general computer usage. Other elements included much of the other service offers that are provided by the library service, such as the summer reading challenge, rhyme time, wellbeing activities, other children's activities, digital skills training, and other groups such as reading groups. In terms of the buildings, as part of phase 1, we did ask around all the different buildings that we have for the library service. So with regard to the central library, respondents recognised that there is a need to modernise the building. Unfortunately, the cost of doing such a thing would be quite significant. So there are no major plans at the moment to invest, and it will be limited to essential and reactive repairs. The aspiration does remain, and we had a general consensus from the survey respondents that the relocation of the central library would be palatable, provided it remained somewhere within the town centre. With regard to Leagrave Library, generally a strong view that the library was well located and a useful resource within the area it is based. There were some suggestions that we could improve the services available at that library by enhancing the access to the first floor of the library, which is currently only accessed through a narrow staircase and is limited to staff access only, which provides us with maybe an opportunity in the future. Stopsey Library, the current location was felt like it probably was not conducive to modern and sustainable library service, given it's a prefabricated building. However, and because of that, respondents recognised the need for modernisation. However, again, it's similar to Central and Leagrave. There are no plans for major investment and just reactive repairs at this time. With Marsh Farm Library, which is based at Lee Manor High School, as I know at the moment, there were lower respondents in regards to this area, but there was a general consensus that it could be better promoted, and some that do use it felt it was the location of it was quite intimidating in requiring access, as it was based as part of the school. So there is some suggestion that it could be there could be a better location in that area for the library. In terms of recommendations for phase 2 based upon that, so more generally in terms of speaking around the library service, it's more around developing proposals that's consider the library as being part of a community hub model alongside other services, so getting a true understanding of what services people expect our libraries to provide as we move forward, as well as following on from the phase 1 conversation, further understanding how library service can be enhanced and develop and meet the needs and demands of all our users. So we'd like to do a bit more exploration around the suggestions that we had come through around providing more activities for our children and young people, as well as essentially across the life course. So we'd like to understand that more, as well as what other services may be useful. In terms of the buildings, we're looking to further develop some proposals around relocating the central library, which we'd then like to take out to consultation to get a sense of where people may like the library to be either located, given some of the options potentially available to us. Leagrave Library, we don't feel there's any further need for consultation on the location as it is at the moment, given the strength of the responses we had. But we are looking at, hopefully, in terms of accessing some funding to enhance that building. Stopsey Library, we felt an additional part of consultation is required, given there was some ambivalence around what the intention for the current site would be if it were to be relocated. And equally, we wanted to have some further discussions with the community on how we may be able to sort of address those concerns that had been raised through part 1 of the consultation. So we'd be interested to take that back to the community and develop some further understanding, as well as developing some further proposals, such as understanding of what, if it were to relocate, what potential use or what potential that land would be used for. Marsh Farm Library would like to consult on the potential relocation of that library moving forward. There are some opportunities within the area of where it could be more suitably located, but we'd like to discuss that with the community. Lucy Library and Berry Park Library, we require further consultation on those to understand, as we had quite poor responses in terms of consultation around their needs. So we want to, again, go out and understand whether potentially consolidating the service from these locations would be a benefit or not. we're on the assumption that we were in Plan B restrictions at that time, so we're hoping that we'll get a better response on the basis of both those libraries. The home library service will require a bit of further consultation and understanding how that service can be enhanced, what the expectation may be in terms of what that can do. There was a lot of positive responses from people who don't utilise the service as they appreciate the need for it, but we're wondering how we can take that service a step further. And then on the access points, we're just looking at putting some further proposals together around exploring alternative models and how we can better provide the service that the access points have at the moment. So all in all, we're proposing to conduct a second phase consultation with a view to commence that from November 2022. The second phase will provide us with that further opportunity to develop those proposals and gain feedback and then report those back. The consultations will involve an online survey engagement forums with residents, stakeholders, partners, internal colleagues. We did do a number of engagement forums, but as I say, there was a bit of, we feel, apprehension around coming out at that time of year, given the COVID pandemic was still at the forefront of the news and the media. So we're hoping now that things have decided that we will get a better response to our physical sort of in-person forums. Broadly on a timeline, we're looking to go live on our procurement process relatively soon. There are no major changes at this moment in time in terms of the service specification, so it'll be much of a like for like, but it will enable us to test the market and ensure we're getting value for money, as well as instilling social value into the library contract. In terms of the phase 2 consultation, as alluded to, we're looking to potentially go live from November 2022, with potentially closing in January, and then completing the analysis and moving back through all the necessary bodies in terms of then taking some finalised recommendations through to executive for a decision or adoption in April, probably beyond April 2023 at this moment in time. So hopefully everyone's had, like I say, an opportunity to read through some of the in-depth feedback that we have received as part of phase 1. And just as a reminder, this is primarily around sort of endorsement and moving the proposals forward to phase 2 consultation. Much like, again, on the previous agenda item, this is around ensuring that we have a full and in-depth consultation process so we avoid any risk of judicial review with any potential changes that are suggested moving forward for the library service. And we'll leave the procurement one off. That's it. Thank you.
I'm going to Chair's prerogative first of all. Marsh Farm, which the consultation when it was actually moved. Yeah, sorry.
Because I should have, and I hadn't remember at the beginning. I'm on the Active Luton board, as you know. Members know, so it's not a decision-making process, it's a consultation. So I'm not too sure, do I need to leave or what, right? Because when it comes to the final decision, then I would have to probably leave because it being on the board does have, you know.
But
so.
I believe we're not taking any sort of monetary. That's going to FRG for that part. We're only looking at the consultation. Am I right?
It's noted that
it's noted that you are.
Yeah.
But I don't see anything to stop you from taking part in the discussion.
Yeah. Especially because the board is not making any decisions. No. They're just supporting the process itself. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or noting, you could. Yeah, you could support or note the process. It's up to members.
Well, I'll leave it to you. Page 363. I know Marsh Farm very well, and before it moved to Lee Manor, there was a consultation, and both myself and the Labour councillor didn't want it to go to Lee Manor, simply because the children from the primary school used to go to the library a lot in the after school for after school activities, and they could just walk, whereas Lee Manor there was older children mingling around. They had to cross an actual road, which didn't have a crossing. I'm not sure if there's a crossing there yet, but it's a lot further than what it was. So, but that's sort of background where I'm coming from. The question 36, I think you should make a distinction between Futures House and Lee Recreation Centre, because I believe the people of Marsh Farm will give you different answers, would prefer to be able to decide whether they wanted Futures House or Lee Recreation Centre, because the parking at the recreation centre, it doesn't make any difference, but I do think you should make that question two-part, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We will definitely make that a clear sort of separate options. We're looking to develop both proposals a bit further, and then maybe some.
Because as I say, Marsh Farm Futures, it's nearer the primary school, so they could go to that fairly easy, whereas the Lee Recreation Centre is effectively the same as Lee Manor School. And that was what the head said at the time as well. Any other questions? Yes, David.
Yes, I'm of course going to just confine myself to my own ward rather than the others, because I don't know the other centres well enough. Yeah, it was disappointingly low turnout, very much so. I do understand it was the pandemic as well, but certainly for my ward, even when there was a face-to-face consultation in Stockwood Library, there was no sign outside, no sign inside. Staff didn't know about it, but eventually I found two of you round the back with no form of evidence for the public. So it doesn't surprise me it was a no consultation with combination of those two. Right. A question before I go any further, because I wasn't sure of the numbers. On my sheet, it's 338. And it's talking about respondents for Stockwood Library, and it said 55% of respondents indicated relocating Stockwood Library would have a negative impact, and 45% felt it would have a positive impact, no impact, or were unsure of the impact. What was the percentage that actually said it would have a positive impact? Take away the I don't knows or whatever. In comparison with the 55, what was the, which said it wasn't a good idea? What was the percentage that said it was?
Sorry, just give me a moment to get that for you. I'll just pull that up for you, just one moment.
Nobody's getting up on his laptop.
Sorry?
He's getting the figures up on the laptop.
Yeah. I just wanted to know what the comparison was. Was in favour, not in favour, and ignoring the people who either didn't know or didn't care.
Yeah.
So with the impact in relocating Stockwood Library, the positive impact was, in terms of number of response, was 46. No impact was 21, negative was 110, and don't know, not sure, 23. But I haven't got that figure there, but I can get that for you just quickly. But thank you.
Count respondents, and you've got the positive impact number 46. So if I've got it right, then it'd be 23.
23% said it was a good idea, and 55 didn't. Okay. That is referred to as ambivalence in the report. I don't think that's ambivalence to me. I think that's a very solid majority in favour of saying no, it's not a good idea. So I don't like to see the word ambivalence used in the report, I'm afraid.
Yeah, just to confirm, I'll double check. There is 200 total responses there, so therefore 46 responses would be 23%, be positive impact.
Thank you. Some saves me having to do it. Yeah, I feel that as far as the Stopsney Library is concerned, we're into an awful loop. I talked to my colleagues because a lot of things to do with libraries in my part of Newton happened before I was a councillor. So I talked to my colleagues about it. We wouldn't be having this discussion if Newton Borough hadn't closed Wigmore Library, which had a proper building and a proper car park. So we've put ourselves in this position. I feel that we have to make sure that we get a proper view about relocation and usage. My informal discussions with residents around Stopsney suggests that the current location is good. Yes, it does need to be used differently. There's garden area at the back that isn't used. There's a school immediately adjacent that don't seem to use it as a resource. I think we're missing out a lot, even with the current position. And I feel that the stage 2 consultation has to be put together in a much more reasoned and balanced way, because with the previous consultation, it was more biased towards forcing the move, which, as we know, was involved with a withdrawn planning application. So I would just like to see stage 2 consultation, please, being a balanced one. Thank you, Chair.
Just to comment, Chair, in terms of the consultation, the question really ought to be fairly transparent and should not in any way trying to get any of the consultees to either in favour or against, not just for the Stopsley Library, but any of the other proposals. They should be very transparent so that public has its own views rather than a judgment from this number of committees. I will certainly oppose anything, and I hope my colleagues do, that which in any way, shape or form makes the bias the influence of the people who've been consulted. But we need to be very transparent. We must be impartial, and we must do the questions in which we are not leading any residents to think that we are trying to influence their decision. So I hope that if I put that a proposal, that my colleagues will not support anything that in any shape it makes it that we are trying to influence anybody, be that Wigmore, Marsh Farm, Shandon Park.
That was the reason that I actually, because of what the questions are, that I actually asked that Marsh Farm Futures and Lee Recreation Centre, it was two separate things.
Agree. I'm not
because
I'm
talking
about where we're saying, well, this is a clear majority, and therefore we should do that as a questionnaire. I'm saying no, because we ought to be very transparent, and we must make public to give their view independently and think if this is a good idea, bad idea, or have no opinion.
Councillor Hussain, thank you very much, because I agree entirely with what you said. My concern was that the original consultation did not do that for my ward. And indeed, the conclusions that have been drawn in this report actually don't even analyse the results that we got in a way that is balanced. They are drawing conclusions which are not valid from the data even that we got.
This is a new, final consultation, and it must, we have to take it and then we make it.
New consultation they've got, if they want to move it, like in Marsh Farm, it's either, do you want to move it? But as I say, that's why I said Marsh Farm to be separate, because a lot of people would say Marsh Farm Futures rather than Lee Recreation Centre, because you've still got car park and you've got to walk, whereas Marsh Farm Futures is so much easier. I don't know how they'd have to use the building and things, what was available in Marsh Farm Futures, but that's why I'm asking for the two to be separate, because that would, and all along since the library moved to Lee Manor, it has never ever been used properly, because in fact at one point I do know for a fact there were some of the librarians from Leagrave were going up and actually covering Lee Manor, because that was the only cost-effective way they could actually run Lee Manor at one point. But I'm going back quite, a few years. But it never ever, once it moved there, it never got the figures that they had at the Power Centre, and it's always been underused.
Yeah.
Sorry to bang on about it.
And so, sorry, Chair, just to come back on both points from Councillor Hussain and Councillor Wynne, that's why it's so important, I think, that we do these multiple phases of consultation to ensure that there is no lead or bias, and why we've come to here before we go to any second phase of consultation to ensure that we're following the right process as best as we can. So I really appreciate the comments and suggestions put forward. So thank you both.
No, but just agreeing the dates and the time, and then when the final recommendation, we can give our opinions just as we did about the other recommendations.
Secondly, to endorse the proposal for phase 2 consultants, and OSB is asked to note the procurement approach and timeline, and I'm also asking that to be referred to FRG, please. Everybody agreed with what I've said? Thank you. Right, thanks very much, Matthew.
Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Right, next thing we've got to do before we go in private, give a big sigh.